All right, it's 1 o'clock. Hello and welcome to the Alpha Anywhere demo and Q&A webcast. I'm Dave McCormick, VP of Products and Services here at Alpha Software, and I am here today with Sarah Mitchell, our chief person in charge of documentation and other things here at Alpha. And today she's going to be giving a demonstration of a brand new feature that came out in Alpha right now with a pre-release, but will be hopefully part of the official release quite soon, and it has to do with GitHub integration. Also joining me, as we have every week, is Dion McCormick, who will be here to answer your questions. So if you have any questions for any of us, go ahead and type those questions into the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel. So let's get started. Hello, Sarah, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
I am, and I can hear you. I'm going to go ahead and make you the presenter. And when you shut off this feature, this is the first time I saw it last week. You should see a dialog box, by the way. Oh, there it is. It says Git. Cool.
All right. Yeah. Spoilers. This is our subject today, Git.
Excellent.
Yeah. So in the pre-release, coming out in the next release, which is soon, like really soon, hopefully this week, possibly next week. We'll see. We've added Git integration into Alpha Anywhere, and this is super exciting. In addition to like not only being able to have source control now on your projects locally, we also have GitHub connections so that you can connect with your existing GitHub repositories if you have them. But I'm just going to demo it for you guys
You will.
today.
Now, what I was
Yep.
really pleased about for the GitHub feature was the fact that, I have a couple different computers that I work on. I have one here at work, I have one at home, I have a laptop computer. And the problem with using software like the Alpha Anywhere IDE is that it's all of your files are stored locally on the computer that you're using. So the idea of making it easy to, I know we have a zip and send feature, and we do have a couple ways of moving these files around, but the idea of easily checking in and checking out a project from whatever computer you're on and having someone else do the same, I thought would be a huge benefit to us. And so I'm really psyched to see this feature.
Yeah, that is one major benefit. Another major benefit is if any of you have used our history system on components and then gotten burned because for whatever reason the component history is gone. That doesn't happen when you use a source control system like Git. It's all saved in history. If you need to pull something out from the past, you just check it out. You can even roll back easily. So it's got a lot of great capabilities in it. So this is the Alpha Anywhere IDE. You should be seeing it right now. I don't have any
Yep.
workspaces open. I wanted to show you guys how this works from a brand new blank workspace. So I'm just going to make a new blank workspace. I'm going to call it Git Demo. I'm going to turn off caps lock and click OK. I want to open the Web Projects Control Panel. So on the Web Projects Control Panel, you will find this new button right here. It says Show Git Menu. By default, your projects are not created as Git repositories. This is something you have to do yourself. But you can come in here and you can make your workspace a Git repository simply by clicking on Yes, make a Git repository. You can also clone an existing GitHub repository, which I will demonstrate soon. And also say, no, I don't want to do this if you change your mind. So I'm going to make this a Git repository. And that's it. That's all I had to do. If I click on all files here, you'll see we create a git ignore file for you, which contains a list of files we recommend you don't put in source control, either because they are always generated, like the manifest files for when you compile a component for publishing, or it's something that's specific to you. We have this file called the component type cache. All it does is track the last thing you opened as a user. That's not something you want to put in source control, especially if you're working with teams, because other people are going to be doing something different and they don't want their settings constantly being reset. So we have that a few files in there. You can find out what we suggest by clicking on this Git settings link in the toolbar area and clicking on edit git ignore file. And this is the stuff we put in by default. We don't We don't check in backup files, we don't check in deleted files, and we don't check in undo files, which are the old way of how Alpha would track things in terms of versioning your components. We don't check in compiled A5W CMP files. They start with an underscore. They might have extra information after them. We don't recommend adding those. And then component info and the component type cache are local to your own workspace as you're working on your projects. So some things to know about this. This Git repository is associated with a project in my workspace. If I create a new project, I will be given an option to make it a Git repository or copy it from GitHub. I'm gonna cancel out of that.
So to be clear, when we're saying new because people get confused on this one.
Right.
We're saying when we're saying a new project, we mean a new project within the workspace. So it's not when
Within
you
the
create a new
workspace.
workspace. A workspace can have multiple projects under it. The first one's called default by
Yep.
default. Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Every workspace has one project in it. You can click on this open project folder icon, and this will open up your project in the Explorer. You see here it's called default.web project. If I go up one level, if I had more than one project in here, they would all be listed here. So that's a very important thing to note. Yeah, you can have multiple projects in a workspace. I have modified files. So with this Git integration, if I create a new component, I'm gonna invoice order. We'll just do that. Create a new one from a template here. Close it and say I'm satisfied with this. My new component here. I will save it. If I go back to web projects, so now I have up here, it says 1 untracked files and 1 modified files. Oh, I didn't know it did that. If you click on this, on untracked or modified, it will open up this Git Commit dialog. You can also access this from under the Git icon by clicking on that. And in here is where you can manage what you commit from your project. So as files change, what's included in your Git repository, what isn't included. I see here that I have added a Git ignore file, so I'm going to commit that first. And then click this commit button, and you'll be given this confirmation message. Just click OK. If an error happens, you'll be notified there. This one down here, untracked files, are files that are not in your repository yet. So you need to select them either by shift clicking or control clicking if you have multiple files in both these sections. So I want to add main component. So I'm going to select it and put a commit message in. And then commit that. And now I've got 2 things in my Git repository. If I make any changes to these, they'll show up as modified files.
When you add things to your web projects control panel, they're not automatically included in stuff that's going to go into the Git repository. You have to tell it specifically to do that.
No, yeah, you have to manually add it. And there's good reason for that. If you're working on something and it's not done yet, it's good practice is don't commit it.
Don't push it yet. Yep.
Don't put changes, especially if you're working in a larger group. You don't want to commit things that are incomplete, because that presents problems. If you tell somebody like, I'll go add that, and then you commit it half-baked, they might assume you're done and then start working on it when you're not done. Or if you're working on something and leave it in a bad state and doesn't work, you don't want to push that up either. So that's just the best practice in general in working with source control. So only commit things that once you've completed them.
Cool. So you've had one question come up. Sorry to interrupt you in the middle of your demo, but someone said, look, I don't have this Git button in my control panel. What's going on?
It is only available in the pre-release, so you have to go to the pre-release page to download it right now. And you can get there by going to help, view pre-release notes, and then download the pre-release installer and run it. So this will be available in the next release. It's not available in the current release.
Right. So if you don't want to use a pre-release, if you want to use an official release, I think you said it'd probably be within a week or so. We do anticipate having an actual Alpha Anywhere release coming out for those of you who'd like to know that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So what I've shown you so far is just local. It's just in Git. Something you do need to know is before you can use this feature, you have to install Git on your system, and you have to make sure you've given access to it on the command line. And I could walk through that installation process if you would like.
Yes, please, if
Yeah,
you
so
could.
we'll do
Okay, so
that.
that feature, while built into Alpha, you still need to do something else in order to make it work.
Right.
Okay.
I'm gonna search for Git. Oh, I don't want to go to GitHub. I just want to go to Git. Oh, let's back up. Here we go.
Hmm.
Git SCM, git-scm.com downloads. And we are investigating to make sure if we can make this process simpler for you guys, we will. If there's a way to just install this for you so you don't have to, we're going to do that. But here is the site you need to go to get Git, not GitHub, just Git. And Alpha Anywhere being a Windows product, you're going to install the Windows version. And when you come to this site, it's going to start the download automatically for you. And so that's the first thing you need to do is download the installer for Windows. Once that download completes, you need to run the installer. And that's done. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to right click on this and run as administrator. You do need to have administrator privileges if you want to install Git because it needs to modify your Windows environment, and that requires administrative privileges to do so.
Now, you were mentioning that during the installation process, all kinds of scary things appear on the screen.
Oh yes, earlier. Yeah, that's
So,
why we're going to walk through this. So
okay, well, so
Git
do not be
Git
afraid.
is a
Yeah.
command line tool. Command line tools are kind of scary because they run on the command line, and we've built all these wonderful like GUI interfaces on top of the command line, so nobody ever has to think about how to just type what they're doing. So when you're installing this, you're going to accept the default components here on this screen. You can, so this is funny. I ran this a few times. So out of the box, the first time you run this, it's going to say use Vim, the ubiquitous text editor. This text editor is only going to be used when you're running Git on the command line. So in Alpha Anywhere, we have a few UI elements we've built around Git commands so that you don't need to use Vim to enter commit messages. If you plan to use Git outside of the scope of Alpha Anywhere, I do recommend you figure out, find a different editor. Vim is very difficult to use. If you get into the Vim environment and don't know how to get out of it, it can be extremely alarming. And that's just because they use a lot of weird shortcuts to do the most basic things like saving files. So I would recommend either get Notepad, you could get Visual Studio Code. I use Visual Studio Code, it's great, I love it. And use something like that as your default editor outside the context of Alpha Anywhere. Again, if you're not going to do that, you can just leave the default setting on this page. It's fine. It's not going to hurt anything. You can always change this setting later. And then here, once you click next, you're going to be asked adjusting your path environment. This is where you need to change something. So you're going to be, it's going to select the top option by default, but you want the second option to add Git to the command line. Or if you plan to use Unix tools, you can also choose the third option. Both the second and third option are great. This will add Git to the path for the environment so Alpha Anywhere can access it. You can use the default SSH option here. That's fine, the open SSH. We do recommend switching over to use the native Windows Secure Channel Library. Here, it will just use the Windows certificates, or if you're on an Active Directory, it will use those certificates for doing HTTPS transport on the back end. Big words, both options will work. The second one is just a little bit easier to think about. And then on configuring the line and environment conversions, you want to pick the last option. Check out as is, commit as is. Don't choose either option that modifies line endings, because line endings in your components may be CRLF, they may be CR, they may be LF, depending on the context. It's important to maintain that. And so if you pick one of these first two options, you run the risk of modifying your components accidentally and getting them in a state where they may not function properly. So check out as is and commit as is. Make sure everybody on your team is using the same setting. If you get one person in here that's switching everything to Unix style line endings when it goes up to your shared repository, it's gonna mess your group up. This terminal editor, it doesn't matter which option you select here. If you're more comfortable using the console window, the command.exe executable, if you do a lot of stuff on command line, you can use this second option. It's just what editor are you going to use when you're running Git Bash, which is a tool that gets installed. I have it installed. I like it for doing Git operations on the command line. And then extra options, uncheck all of these. They're going to be checked when you come in here. Just uncheck all of them. File system caching can improve the performance when you're using Git, but it can also lead to degradation in your performance. So it may make things faster. It could also make things slower, depending on what happens. The credential manager for Windows, unless you're using two-factor authentication, which we don't recommend with Alpha Anywhere at this point, it's going to mess up Alpha. You don't need that, so you can turn that off. And then symbolic links aren't needed either.
Unless you're using two-factor authentication with Git, right?
With
Not
Git,
not
yeah.
in your Alpha Anywhere project. You can still,
Not an
because that's
Alpha
a whole new
Anywhere.
feature is
Yeah.
two-factor. I want to make sure that, wait, my
Yeah.
project's
With
got
Git, no.
two-factor. I
If
can't
you're
use
using
Git?
two-factor with Git or GitHub or some other tool out there that uses Git with two-factor authentication, then you might need this credential manager.
Gotcha.
But we don't do that, so don't turn it on. And so once you've done that, you can install. I'm not going to run the installer because I already have everything installed here.
Mhm.
So we'll exit setup, yeah. So we'll pretend that ran. And at which point, after you've installed that, if Alpha Anywhere was already running and you hadn't done the installation of Git yet, you need to close Alpha and start it again so it gets the updated environment variables. Environment variables are cached when the application first launches and it never goes and pulls them again. And this is just generally all Windows programs do this. So you would want to close Alpha and launch it again, at which point you'll have Git access to the Git integration tools. You will know if you don't have Git installed properly because Alpha will tell you it can't find it and will tell you where to go to download it and run the installer. So
Gotcha.
we do that for you. And there is a help article that's going up that will help everything I just described in detail for you. So you don't need to memorize this or come back and watch the video later.
You don't, I saw a preview of that article. We don't have a link to it yet, though, do we?
No, not yet. I need to get all the images into a format that's acceptable for web consumption.
All right, excellent. But it will be in our help system soon. Awesome.
Oh, absolutely, yes. Yeah, everything here will be in the help system.
Great. Now,
so
the other
that's Git.
Yeah, okay.
I want to transition over to GitHub next, unless there's some lingering questions about what we've gone over so far.
This is one I don't know the answer to because I don't really know how Git works at the file level, but someone asked, can a Git repository be placed on a Google Drive, or does it need to be on a server that's running Git?
I mean, you can save your files. Like if you have a Git repository in the Google Drive and work from that, you could do that.
But you wouldn't be able to use the push and the pull features and all of that from Google Drive. It would have to be something.
No. So like if it's on your Google Drive, and I have Google installed on my system, I've got it mapped to a local hard drive. It's like a virtual hard drive. The files would just save there directly. There's no push and pull. So like push and pull to GitHub are GitHub hosts Git on their system, and that's where like all your main core repository lives. And then as a user of GitHub, you would clone the repository locally. So you make a copy of the main repository locally and do all your edits locally. And once you're done doing whatever you need to do, you push all of those changes back up to the server, which then merges them into the main core system.
Excellent. And
So
that,
if you're saving your Git repository on Google Drive as a virtual drive, it's the same as just saving it on your C drive, but you only have one repository you're working from. Does that make sense?
yeah, another sort of similar question though is, where are the Git repositories located on my machine? Are they separate from the project, or are they the project?
They are the project.
They are the
So if you click
project.
that open file,
Yeah.
this open, you're going to find a new folder in here. You might not see it if you haven't enabled the ability to see files and folders that start with a period. You might need to turn that on.
Hmm.
I can't remember how to do that. But this .git folder is the repository. It contains all the commit information, the logs, everything that is configured on this project, all your changes. They
I
live in this
see. Okay.
logs folder.
Yep.
I don't know what's in here, but that's the repository. Like this is everything to track all those changes and
Hmm.
everything that lives in your web project folder.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, over to GitHub, I guess.
Yeah, so that's the next thing I want to show. So the GitHub integration is actually quite cool. So some of you might be familiar with our Alpha Anywhere repository on GitHub, and I'm going to cheat and just go to GitHub. I'm logged in, so don't look at my secret repositories. But up here at github.com/alphaanywhere, we have 20 repositories of all sorts of different things. One that I've been working on, and I'm hoping to get that done soon, is a styling applications repository that's got a whole bunch of components in it that you guys can come and look at for how to do interesting things with styling apps in Alpha. But other ones you already know about, the Project Punch List app. We have a Northwind sample application, Inspection Solutions, PumpJack Pro. These all live up here in our GitHub Alpha Anywhere repository. And what you can do is you can come up here and go to like this project punch list and just copy the URL up here in the address bar. Oops, Control C, and go back to Alpha Anywhere and create a new project and pull that down from GitHub. So I'm going to go to File, New Project. I'm going to say create a project from a GitHub repository. I'm going to call this one punch list. I'm going to paste the URL in here and click OK. And what this is going to do is it's going to make a new project. It's going to clone the Alpha Anywhere repository for the punch list application down to my local machine. And a clone it creates a copy with the linkage, which I'll explain a little bit here right after we go through this, but it creates a clone, so all the files will be local. And then that's it, like that's my new project. So I have punch list here now. It's linked to GitHub. So if I make changes here and save them locally by committing them, I could use these push and pull options to push it back up to GitHub. I can do that because I'm a contributor on that repository. You guys will not be allowed to do that because you are not contributors on the repository. But I wanted to show you just how this works. So one of the things I've been working on with this project is just getting this git ignore file up to snuff so that it is it's got the correct things in it. Some early testing with this. When you pull down a repository that didn't have a git ignore in it already, creating a new one is totally blank. So I wanted to include some stuff like the oops, what did I do? There we go. I wanted to include things like those, the undo folder, the component type cache stuff in there so that it's not showing up in my Git log when I'm doing stuff. So I'm gonna finish doing that by coming over here and editing this one in my default repository, which has everything I need to add, and copy it out and go back over to punch list and say edit the git ignore and just paste that in there. I'll click OK. I have now one modified file. I'm going to come over here, and first I'm going to commit this change locally. I'm going to select it from the tracked files. I'm going to say updated git ignore file with AA stuff to ignore. I'm going to commit it. So I have just committed this change locally. It's saved here, but it's not in GitHub where I want it to be at the end of the day. So after I've done that, I'm going to click push to GitHub. You're going to be prompted with this to enter your credentials. I need to enter my Git settings in here so that I can save it. So I'm going to click save user ID and password. Oop. And this is your GitHub credentials. If you don't have a GitHub account, you can create one. And so after you've entered your credentials, when you do a push, it should work. If it didn't enter it right, you'll get another error, and you should probably try your password again. But this is telling me that it pushed my changes from here, my local master copy, up to the master copy on the website on GitHub. And now if I go back to GitHub and we refresh this page, you will see this is that commit message I just created. This change was from a minute ago, and if we look at the file, it's got everything in there that I added. So this is fantastic. I love this this integration. So that's really exciting. For if you do a clone of a GitHub repository, but you don't have access to edit things, but maybe you want to save it locally or push it up to a different one. If you go into Git settings, you can change this register change remote GitHub repository. So here you can remove the URL. You could put a different one in there. If you have a local Git repository and you want to commit it up to GitHub, you would add the URL here for that remote repository, which would then allow you to take your local changes and push them up to GitHub for everyone else. So that's where you need to change these things.
Cool. So if someone came to the Alpha Anywhere repository and said, well, I'm interested in that sample application, they could use the URL from this page to pull it down to their computer, and then they can change the Git that they want to use so that they push it up to a different one, to a new one that's on their account.
Or remove it completely and just work locally.
Or just work locally, sure.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Wow, very cool.
Yes, super cool.
Anything else in the world of Git?
Well, just this other thing, there's this other option called pull from GitHub. So if I'm working with a team and they have, they've made a change. So I'm going to make a change up here. I'll just add some new lines in here. And I'm going to commit my changes. So this is a change that's been made up on GitHub on the main branch. My local copy is now out of sync with this. So I would need to, in Alpha, come down here and do a pull to get those changes. So I'm going to click that button and see what happens. So it shows me the changes it's pulling down, gives me a result. So this fast forward just means that it's downloaded a file and it's just moving the sort of like timestamp tracker locally in my Git repository to match the current one up on the main branch. And it's also showing you what command was executed, a git pull. You can do a lot with Git besides push and pull. So, but this is just to show you what happened.
Now let's say you are in a project and you wanted to, like, from the command line, do some of those other Git things that we don't support. It looks like there's a new feature that lets us do that.
Yes, so one of the things you can do is you can click this little tiny computer screen thing, and it opens the Windows command line environment right inside your projects folder. And so one thing that one command that's actually kind of useful to figure out if you are current or if you've got changes that need to be pushed up is Git Status. And all this does is it just tells you what the current status is. So I'm on branch master. I'm not working in a branch. I'm up to date with the origin, which is GitHub, where I copied everything out, and I have nothing to commit, and there's nothing in my, there's no changes that have, there's no new files, there's no deleted files, there's no modified files in my repository right now. So that's what this message is telling me. If we go and look at I'm just going to show you the documentation stuff. If my git command will open here. So if I run a git status here in documentation, I see I have a whole bunch of red files. These are untracked files. They're new files that need to be added. I have a whole bunch of modified files. But I am up to date with master, so there's no changes on the server I need to pull down from my coworkers to merge in locally. I just have a whole bunch of stuff I'm working on that hasn't been checked in. So that's just sort of show you the difference between stuff.
So right now, Alpha doesn't have a way to let you know, whether or not you got the most up to date or not the most up to date.
No, that's not integrated into user interface. This is very early.
But you can, it's early, right? But you can do it if you drop here into the command line and do a git status. You can get the answer to that. So I'm just answering your questions.
And if you're working with GitHub, specifically, they do have a GitHub for Windows tool, which is quite fantastic. I enjoy using it. It kind of gives you access to more powerful things like making branches or doing stashes. A stash is when you take a bunch of local changes and you save them away somewhere so they're just out of your main repository. So maybe you're working on something and then a bug comes up. You're like, oh, I need to fix this, but I've been modifying this file and I'm really close to being done. You could stash all that work you've been doing, go make your one change, commit that, and then pull all those changes back out and continue from where you left off.
Very cool. The GitHub desktop also works on Mac. So I've used the Mac version, even though my files are on Windows and Parallels running on the Mac, but that combination I've had no problem with either. So that seems to work pretty well. Very cool.
What else do I want to mention? Really critical. We haven't integrated it yet, but we're testing it to figure out how to solve this problem. Only one person should edit a component at a time. If two people edit the same component and try to push those changes up, you're going to get a merge conflict, and Alpha Anywhere components can't really be manually merged. So you want to make sure that if you're working in a team, people are making edits to one file, only one person is editing the file at a time, and that you're getting that change out and to whoever else needs to make the next change. So that's really key. You do not want multiple edits on the same file.
Is there a way to, when you check out, like lock the file, or is this just one of the things where you should have a Slack or an email or a Skype and say, hey, I'm working on this?
Right now you guys are just going to have to be diligent, but there is a tool, and I'm doing some research. Somebody has built a way to do file locking with Git. And so the interesting issue with Git is it's a distributed source control system. And what that means is that you have one core branch or one core master location where everything is like saved, everybody's like working off that, and then everybody makes a copy, a local copy. So you're cloning that branch down and making all your changes locally, and then at some point sending it all back so that other people can copy that from the main source back to their system. Other source control systems out there work differently. I think Perforce works by you check out a file, so you flag, hey, I'm working on this file on the main system, and there's no like local copy. You're always just flagging files as being modified or checked out by various developers, and then as they're checked back in, people get those updates when they synchronize their files. So you're not working on a local branch and committing your changes. They're always going back up to the core system, but you're working locally, and then you're committing all of those local changes back up to the main system. It's like a two-step process for it instead of working directly with it.
Very cool. Anything else? Are we ready to go into questions?
I'm ready to answer some questions.
Ready to answer some questions. We've been answering the Git questions as we go along so far, but if anyone has any additional Git questions or questions on any other part of Alpha Anywhere, I'm here with Sarah Mitchell in charge of documentation, as well as Dion McCormick, our lead solutions engineer. So ask away, or we get to leave early.
Or we get to leave early.
Or we get to leave early.
Oh yeah.
We'd prefer the questions though. So if you've got any questions, comments, whatever, just go ahead and type them into the questions box.
There must be questions.
There must be. There's a lot of people here today. All right, hang on. I think that's about it. Dion, do you have any questions?
No, I'm really excited to get inside the new release and play with the Git integration. I mean, that's going to be huge for teamwork, because when you have multiple people working on the same project, coordinate it can be just a nightmare. And once you have good source control in place, it just makes it a breeze.
Yeah, fantastic.
Even if you're an individual, it'd be good to use source control.
Okay. Ooh, a question has just come in. Is there a way to convert in Alpha TIFF images to PDF? Do we have some sort of something in Alpha that lets us do? I know we could do certain amounts of file manipulation, but I don't know if we can do that.
TIFF to PDF.
Mm-hmm.
We have image to PDF. I don't know if it supports TIFF though. That would require some investigation.
We will take a look. If you want to send that over to guides@alphasoftware.com, we will take a look.
Yeah, send us a TIFF file too. That would be helpful.
Question: does Alpha Anywhere work with Microsoft Teams like we can with Visual Studio? Let's investigate.
No, I
I'm
mean,
not sure what Microsoft Teams is.
You could use an external, I've used for Git, I've used external Git management tools, graphical, and because it's really just file management kind of thing. So you could use it, but not internally to the tool at this time.
It's not integrated, but you can certainly use it. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Well, that looks like it. It's going to be a short session. Sarah, thanks very much for presenting.
Thank you, Sarah.
This is something we're all going to enjoy using. We will be back here next Wednesday. Then the Wednesday afterwards, we are actually going to take a break. So if you have any questions in the meantime, go ahead, send them in to guides, GUIDES @alphasoftware.com. Thanks so much for everyone who showed up, especially those who asked questions. Thanks again, Sarah and Dion. Take care and have a great week. Bye-bye.